There's a lie you've been telling yourself, and it's keeping you trapped. You think you're a perfectionist because you care about quality, because you have high standards, because you refuse to settle for mediocre. But Carl Jung saw something else entirely. He saw perfectionism as a mask, a beautiful, socially acceptable mask that hides your deepest fear. Not the fear of failure, the fear of your own power. Let me paint you a picture that might feel uncomfortably familiar. You've been working on that project for months. Maybe it's a business idea, a creative endeavor, or even just a simple email that somehow turned into a 3-hour ordeal. You tell yourself you're being thorough, responsible, professional. You have standards after all. But here's what's really happening. You're stuck in what Carl Jung called elegant paralysis. You look busy, you feel busy, hell you are busy, but you're not moving. You're spinning your wheels in the most socially acceptable way possible. Because here's the thing about perfectionism that nobody talks about. It's not actually about wanting things to be good. It's about being terrified of what happens when things are too good. When they're so good that people notice. When they're so good that suddenly you can't hide behind "I'm still working on it" anymore. Think about it. When was the last time you actually finished something and felt satisfied? When was the last time you put something into the world without that nagging voice saying, "But what if you just tweaked this one more thing?" Most people think perfectionists are just overachievers with impossibly high standards. But Jung saw something much darker and much more profound. He saw people who had unconsciously chosen the safety of never quite arriving over the risk of discovering their actual potential. Jung wrote extensively about what he called the transcendent function, the psychological mechanism that bridges conscious and unconscious material. For perfectionists, this function becomes corrupted. Instead of bridging the gap between who you are and who you could become, perfectionism creates an endless loop that keeps you trapped in the space between. Excellence says, "I want to do this really well." Perfectionism whispers, "I can't let anyone see this until it's flawless." One moves forward, the other stands frozen. The cruel irony, your meticulous attention to detail, your refusal to put out anything subpar, the very things you think are protecting your reputation, are actually keeping you anonymous. You're so terrified of being judged for imperfect work that you never give anyone the chance to be blown away by your actual capabilities. Perfectionism isn't a character strength, it's a character defense. And like all defenses, it's protecting you from something. But what? The answer lies deeper than most people realize. Jung believed that every human being carries what he called a personal myth, a deep, archetypal story about who they are and what they're here to do. Perfectionism hijacks this myth. It transforms your story from "I am someone with something important to contribute" into "I am someone who must never be wrong." The shift is subtle but devastating, because when your identity becomes tied to never making mistakes, you stop taking the risks that would allow you to discover what you're actually capable of. You choose the certainty of staying small over the uncertainty of growing large. This is where it gets really twisted. Society doesn't just tolerate your perfectionism, it celebrates it. It rewards it. It makes it seem noble. "Oh, Sarah, she's such a perfectionist. She won't release anything until it's absolutely perfect." And everyone nods approvingly, like this is a virtue instead of a prison sentence. We live in a culture that has somehow convinced us that waiting until you're ready is responsible, when in reality, it's often the most irresponsible thing you can do. Because while you're perfecting and polishing and procrastinating, life is happening. Opportunities are passing. Your potential is gathering dust. Jung observed that we create what he called personas, social masks that help us navigate the world safely. And in our achievement-obsessed culture, the perfectionist persona is gold-plated. It makes you look dedicated, disciplined, conscientious. It's the perfect excuse for an action that doesn't look like laziness. Think about how this plays out in real life. You're at a dinner party and someone asks about your project. "Oh, I'm still working on it. I want to make sure I get it right." Everyone respects that answer. No one questions it. No one says, "Dude, you've been getting it right for 2 years. Maybe the problem isn't the project." The system loves perfectionism because it keeps people small and predictable. It keeps them from disrupting things, from challenging the status quo, from stepping too far out of line. A perfectionist will never release something revolutionary because revolutionary things are, by definition, rough around the edges. But here's what really messes with your head. Perfectionism feels productive. You're always doing something, always improving something, always making progress, except you're not progressing toward completion. You're progressing toward more perfectionism. It's like being on a treadmill. Lots of movement, lots of effort, lots of sweat, but you're not actually going anywhere. And the most insidious part? The world reinforces this behavior because it's non-threatening. A perfectionist will never outshine anyone because they never actually show up to compete. They're always still working on it. Jung saw through this entire charade. He understood that what we call perfectionism is often just fear wearing a respectable outfit. Fear of judgment, sure, but more than that, fear of success, fear of having to live up to your own potential, fear of discovering that you've been playing small when you could have been playing big all along. Now let's talk about what this is actually doing to you, because the cost of perfectionism isn't just missed opportunities, it's a slow-motion destruction of your sense of self. Jung wrote extensively about what happens when we repress parts of ourselves, and perfectionism is a masterclass in self-repression. You're not just holding back your work, you're holding back your authentic self, the part of you that creates messy, imperfect, human things, the part that learns by doing instead of thinking. Here's what nobody tells you about the perfectionist trap. It creates a feedback loop of never being enough. Nothing you do meets your standards, so you never get the satisfaction of completion. You never get to experience the joy of putting something into the world and watching it make an impact. Instead, you live in a perpetual state of almost ready, almost good enough, almost there. And almost is an emotional purgatory that slowly eats away at your confidence, your creativity, and your willingness to take risks. I've seen this destroy people. Brilliant, talented individuals who had something important to say, something valuable to contribute, but they couldn't get past their own impossibly high standards. They ended up with hard drives full of unfinished projects and hearts full of regret. The psychological toll is real. Chronic anxiety becomes your baseline because you're never actually completing the stress cycle. You start something, work on it obsessively, but never get the relief that comes from finishing. Your nervous system is constantly activated, constantly on edge, because there's always something that could be improved. And here's the kicker. Perfectionism doesn't even lead to better outcomes. Studies have shown that perfectionistic thinking is associated with higher rates of anxiety, depression, and creative blocks. The very thing you think is making your work better is actually making your life worse. But the deepest cut is existential. Jung believed that we all have a fundamental drive toward what he called individuation, becoming who we're truly meant to be. Perfectionism blocks this process entirely. You can't individuate if you never show the world who you actually are. You can't grow into your potential if you're too afraid to reveal your current level. Think about the relationships this affects. How can people truly know you if they only ever see your polished, perfected presentation? How can you form deep connections if you're constantly managing your image instead of being authentic? Even worse, perfectionism trains you to focus on what's wrong rather than what's possible. You become a master at spotting flaws, problems, things that need to be fixed. But you lose the ability to see potential, beauty, and good enoughness. You develop what I call deficiency vision. You can only see what's missing, never what's there. This is why many perfectionists feel empty even when they achieve external success. They've trained themselves to never be satisfied, never be content, never be enough. It's not a bug in the system, it's the feature. Perfectionism needs you to never arrive so it can stay in control. This is where Jung's insights become radical and transformative. Perfectionism isn't just about fear of failure. It's about fear of a specific kind of success, the kind that would fundamentally change how you see yourself and how others see you. In Jungian psychology, the shadow contains everything we've rejected about ourselves, including our power, our potential, and our capacity for greatness. For the perfectionist, the shadow often holds their unacknowledged brilliance, the very thing they're afraid to let out. People often fear their light more than their darkness. Embracing your darkness just makes you human. But embracing your light, that makes you responsible. That makes you accountable. That makes you someone who can no longer claim ignorance about what they're capable of. Picture this scenario. What if you released that project tomorrow, imperfect as it is, and people loved it? What if your rough draft was better than most people's final version? What if your good enough was actually extraordinary? That's genuinely terrifying, because it would mean you've been hiding. It would mean you've been playing small not because you had to, but because you chose to. It would mean taking responsibility for all the time you spent polishing when you could have been creating. Jung called this the fear of one's own greatness. It's real, it's common, and it's devastating. Because when you're afraid of your own power, you unconsciously sabotage yourself to avoid having to use it. Something fascinating happens in Jungian thought called enantiodromia, the tendency for things to transform into their opposite. The very perfectionism that's been holding you back contains within it the seeds of your liberation. Your attention to detail, your high standards, your deep care about quality. These aren't character flaws. They're superpowers that have been misdirected. Consider this insight. Everything that irritates us about others can lead us to an understanding of ourselves. The same applies to what irritates us about our own behavior. Your perfectionism is irritating because it's your creative power turned against itself. It's your capacity for excellence being used as a weapon of self-limitation. Living within your shadow right now, your ability to create something meaningful, even if it's imperfect. Your capacity to influence people, even if you don't have all the answers. Your potential to contribute something unique to the world, even if it's not revolutionary. But perfectionism keeps all of that locked away. It whispers, not yet, not until it's flawless, not until you're worthy. Except you'll never feel worthy because worthiness isn't the point. Courage is. The path to wholeness doesn't run through perfection, but through integration. Integrating all parts of yourself, including the part that creates imperfect things and the part that shares them anyway. Your shadow doesn't contain your darkness. It contains your aliveness. Your willingness to try, to fail, to learn, to grow, to show up as you are instead of as you think you should be. And this is the profound truth Jung discovered. The very qualities that make something imperfect, vulnerability, authenticity, humanness, are often what make it powerful. People don't connect with perfection. They connect with truth. They connect with someone who's brave enough to be real. This connects to what he called the wounded healer archetype. Your imperfections aren't bugs in your system. They're features. They're what make your contribution uniquely yours. They're what allow others to see themselves in your work and feel less alone in their own struggles. The philosopher Rainer Maria Rilke, whose work Jung deeply admired, wrote, "Perhaps all the dragons in our lives are princesses who are only waiting to see us act just once with beauty and courage. Your perfectionism is that dragon, and the princess waiting to be freed, your authentic creative power." So how do you break free from this beautiful prison? How do you reclaim the power you've been so afraid of? First, understand something fundamental. The goal isn't to stop caring about quality, it's to stop using quality as an excuse for inaction. Excellence and perfectionism operate on completely different principles. Excellence moves forward. Perfectionism moves in circles. Jung championed what he called active imagination, the practice of consciously engaging with unconscious material to integrate it. For the perfectionist, this means having a direct conversation with the part of you that's been holding you back. Try this. Sit down and write a letter to your perfectionism. Thank it for trying to protect you. Ask it what it's been afraid would happen if you released imperfect work. Listen to the response without judgment. Often you'll discover that the fear isn't about your work being bad. It's about your work revealing who you really are. Now, here's your practical roadmap to freedom. The 72-hour rule. When you catch yourself saying, "I just need to polish this a little more," set a 72-hour deadline. No exceptions. This forces what Jung called the transcendent function to activate. Your unconscious wisdom has to surface when it can't hide behind endless revision. The 80% release protocol. Take something you've been perfecting and release it when it's 80% of where you want it to be. Not because 80% is your new standard, but because you need to retrain your nervous system to handle the vulnerability of being seen. Here's what will happen. The world won't end. People won't reject you. In fact, you might discover that your 80% is better than most people's 100%. Shadow dialogue practice. When you feel the perfectionist panic rising, that urge to revise just one more time, pause and ask, what am I really afraid of here? What's the worst thing that could happen if I share this now? Write down the answers. Usually, the fear isn't about the work being bad. It's about the work being good enough that people notice and you can't hide anymore. The imperfection challenge. Deliberately do one thing imperfectly each day. Send an email without proofreading it 15 times. Post a photo without the perfect filter. Share an idea before you've thought through every possible objection. Each small act of imperfect courage builds your capacity for bigger acts. But here's where we go deeper into Jung's wisdom. He understood that lasting change happens not through willpower, but through what he called holding the tension of opposites. You don't need to choose between caring about quality and taking action. You need to learn to hold both truths simultaneously. You can care deeply about your work and share it before it's perfect. The integration practice. Every evening, write down 3 things. What you created today, even if imperfect. What you learned from taking action, and what you would do differently next time. This creates what Jung called conscious realization. You're actively integrating the lessons instead of just reacting to outcomes. Energy redirection technique. Jung observed that repressed energy doesn't disappear, it gets redirected. Your perfectionist energy is actually creative energy that's been misdirected toward control instead of creation. When you feel the urge to perfect something, redirect that energy towards starting something new instead. Use your high standards as fuel for your next project, not as a prison for your current one. The mentor's voice exercise. Jung believed we all carry within us the voice of the wise mentor, what he called the wise old man archetype. When you're paralyzed by perfectionism, ask yourself, what would someone who truly cared about my growth tell me right now? Often, that inner mentor will tell you to stop hiding and start sharing. Community accountability. Find people who will call you out on your perfectionist patterns with love. Share your work with trusted friends who understand that feedback is about improvement, not judgment. Jung emphasized that individuation happens in relationship. We can't see our blind spots alone. Here's what most people miss about overcoming perfectionism. It's not about lowering your standards, it's about applying your high standards to the right thing, instead of applying them to individual pieces of work, which leads to paralysis. Apply them to your overall growth trajectory. Ask yourself, am I becoming the person I want to become? Am I contributing what I came here to contribute? The philosopher's approach. The ancient Stoics, whose wisdom Jung deeply respected, had a concept called preferred indifference. Things that are nice to have, but not necessary for flourishing. Perfect execution is a preferred indifferent. Courage is essential. Authenticity is essential. Contribution is essential. But perfection? That's just a nice to have that becomes toxic when it's treated as essential. Remember, your perfectionism served a purpose when you needed protection. But protection that never ends becomes imprisonment. Jung called this process circumambulation. You keep walking in circles around your potential instead of stepping into it. Here's what Jung knew that most people don't. Your perfectionism isn't protecting you from failure. It's protecting you from success. The kind of success that would require you to step fully into who you could become. But you can't become that person by thinking about it, planning for it, or perfecting your way toward it. You can only become that person by acting like that person, by creating like that person, by sharing like that person, imperfectly, courageously, authentically. Jung spent his entire career studying what he called the individuation process, the journey of becoming who you truly are. And here's what he discovered. The path to wholeness isn't through avoiding mistakes. It's through making them consciously, learning from them deeply, and integrating them into your growing wisdom. He wrote, I am not what happened to me, I am what I choose to become. But you can't choose to become someone you've never allowed yourself to be. You can't become the person who creates meaningful work if you never create anything because it's not perfect enough. You can't become someone who impacts others if you never share your voice because it doesn't sound exactly like you want it to. So here's your invitation, not to mediocrity, but to magnificence. The magnificence of showing up as you are instead of as you think you should be. The magnificence of contributing your voice to the world before it's perfectly polished. The magnificence of trusting that you're good enough might be extraordinary. Your 30-day integration challenge. For the next 30 days, I want you to practice what Jung would call conscious imperfection. Each day, do one thing that matters to you without perfecting it first. Create something, share something, start something, document the process. Notice what happens when you choose courage over comfort, action over analysis. Week 1. Focus on small acts of creative courage. Write something and publish it the same day. Record a video in one take. Send the email without endless revisions. Week 2. Expand to bigger creative risks. Start the project you've been planning forever. Have the conversation you've been rehearsing in your head. Apply for the opportunity you don't feel 100% ready for. Week 3. Practice vulnerable sharing. Show your work to people whose opinions matter to you. Ask for feedback on something before you think it's ready. Let people see you in the process of becoming, not just in the polished result. Week 4. Integrate everything. Reflect on what you've learned about yourself. Write about how your relationship with imperfection has changed. Notice how your creative output has expanded when you stopped trying to perfect it. Jung believed that real transformation happens not through dramatic breakthroughs, but through what he called the small steps of conscious living. Each imperfect action you take is a small step toward the person you're becoming. Each moment you choose courage over comfort is a vote for your authentic self over your protective persona. The deeper question, as you embark on this journey, ask yourself Jung's most powerful question. What is the unlived life within me? What part of you have you been protecting through perfectionism? What dreams have been deferred? What gifts have been hidden? What impact have you postponed while you waited to be ready? The philosopher Nietzsche, whose work deeply influenced Jung, wrote, "You must have chaos within you to give birth to a dancing star. Your imperfections aren't obstacles to your greatness. They're the chaos from which your unique contribution will emerge." Remember this, every master was once a disaster. Every expert was once a beginner. Every person you admire started by doing things badly and sharing them anyway. They didn't wait for permission. They didn't wait for perfection. They waited for courage, and then they acted. What are you not sharing because it's not perfect yet? What project is gathering dust while you polish it to death? What part of your potential are you keeping locked away because you're afraid of your own power? The world is waiting, not for your perfection, for your courage, not for your flawless execution, for your authentic contribution, not for you to be ready, for you to begin. Jung once wrote, "The privilege of a lifetime is being who you are. But you can't be who you are if you're too afraid to show who you are." Your perfectionism has served its purpose. It protected you when you needed protection. But now it's time to graduate from protection to creation, from safety to significance, from hiding your light to letting it shine, however imperfectly, however vulnerably, however beautifully human. The final truth, at the end of your life, you won't remember the things you perfected. You'll remember the moments you were brave enough to be real. You'll remember the times you chose growth over comfort, truth over safety, authentic expression over perfect performance. The question isn't whether you're ready. The question is whether you're brave enough to act before you feel ready. Whether you're willing to trust that your imperfect action might be exactly what the world needs right now. Your power is waiting. Your contribution is waiting. Your authentic self is waiting. Stop perfecting. Start creating. Stop hiding. Start sharing. Stop preparing. Start participating in your own life. The world needs what you have to offer, not when it's perfect, but now. While it's real, while it's yours, while it's beautifully, courageously, powerfully imperfect. That's where your true strength lies. That's where your real impact waits. That's where the person you're meant to become is standing, ready to emerge. All you have to do is stop being afraid of your own power long enough to use it. And if you're ready to go deeper into this work, to truly understand how your unconscious patterns are shaping your life, check out the resources I've created to help you navigate this journey. Because transformation isn't a solo journey. It's something we do together, imperfectly, courageously, authentically. Your time is now, your voice matters, your imperfect contribution is needed. Trust that and begin.